Welcome to the Georgio Says podcast. Spilling the tea with Georgio Says. If you love to keep up to date with all the latest pop culture news and celebrity gossip, then this is the podcast for you. Now, please welcome your host, Georgio Says.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Georgio Says, the podcast. I am your host, Georgio. And before we get into today's episode, I just want to remind people that today's episode, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'm obviously going to talk about Housewives, but more in the context of how I became Georgio Says, if you will. And I get a lot of questions, basically like, when did I start doing this? And how long have I been doing it? And, what is it that drives me to do what I do? And I've kind of talked about it on other people's podcasts, but in small doses, just because I'm working on something else that's going to come out later this year that will kind of dive more into my story and all that fun stuff. But I thought it would be a great way for you guys to kind of further get to know me a little bit, have a little bit more context, and kind of understand how I fell into Georgio Says and what drove me here and why it was the best decision I ever made in terms of what I'm passionate and motivated by. So, but before we get into that, I just want to do some friendly reminders. So you are currently watching this episode while I am on holiday in Greece. I am still posting from Greece, but I obviously can't do all of the content that I normally do because I'm in a different time zone and it would just be very hectic. So these are pre-records, but I did them in a way that wasn't going to be dated. Like, I'm not doing this particular episode on anything just because I can fill you guys in from TikTok and Instagram. But today's episode, I'm mainly discussing my journey here and just kind of how everything kind of just slowly unfolded for me. Well, I don't want to say slowly because it felt in the moment that it was happening very quickly. And it was positively overwhelming, but it was still overwhelming. But I also wanted to do this because I get a lot of DMs from people who, they are on the fence about starting something. They are creative. They are passionate about talking about things or putting themselves out there. And they always ask me, like, how do you do it? How did you get started? Like, what keeps you going? How do you do it and not get impacted by, the trolls, or just sometimes social media is overwhelming. And I do know that part of mental health goes with taking social media in doses. And for me, I kind of have this like double-edged sword situation going on. I am obviously a creator, so I am on these apps on a daily basis. And I'm also a viewer on these apps. So, I'm not the only person who's a creator and also consumes content. But what I'm saying is that for me personally, maybe without realizing it, I think my whole life, I kind of geared myself up to put myself out there, if you will. And as many of you who know me know that I'm an Aquarius, so it's not far out of reach that I would be in this kind of space, right? But I think for me, even as a child, I had I don't know why, but I had this premonition as a child that I was meant to do something on a public level, whether, it obviously involved entertainment. And as a child, I didn't know exactly what that entailed. But I always knew that I was destined to do something. And so I say that to say that it took a long time for me to just get in and start creating content. I think for a long time, I visioned what it would look like in my head, but I never actually pulled the trigger because I was either scared of what the other side of that could look like and I wasn't ready for it, good or bad. And also, I wasn't really as good in my skin as I made people think. Like, I'm I'm one of those people that I think a lot of people meet for the first time and think that either, and I have gotten this more times than not, and most of the time I end up being friends with these people, which is why this is such a humorous thing. But a lot of times when I meet people off first glance, sometimes more times than not, I should say, later on they will tell me, oh, wow, when I first met you, I thought you were going to be a bitch, or I thought you were going to be a dickhead, or I thought you were going to be some pompous jerk, because I guess my facial expressions are, I try to be more aware of that, but also sometimes I just don't care. But sometimes I can see, obviously like I'm not like outgoing. Like I'm not the first person to come into the room and introduce myself to everybody. Like I slowly make my way around. I kind of like to observe my environment. And then once I feel comfortable, then I will, be social or put myself out there. So I've heard that a ton of times. And then the flip side of that is like, you're actually completely opposite of that. You are the sweetest person, which I always think is a nice compliment because you don't really meet a lot of nice people. And I think that's partially why I try to not be nice, but be kind. Because I learned through therapy that being nice is not the same as being kind. You can be nice and still not be kind. So I try to work on making sure that I can be a kind person in the world, in my close circles. And obviously that's not always easy to do because the world right now, the way it is very testy, and there's people going through so much. It's kind of a dark time. But in the light of all that, I think the balance for me that's kept me above water has been my passion to create. And even if I wasn't creating, the sheer fact that I could come up with ideas even in my darkest moments, even though I knew I wasn't going to execute on them, it was like this small part of me that was like, nope, you're still there. You're going to work your way back to that. And not to go completely dark, but in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a different situation happening. So before TikTok and before Georgio Says, there is Giorgio Not Armani on Instagram. Now, that took me a long time to grow because that was my baby. I was obsessed with Instagram when it first came out. I finally found this one outlet that I felt like I could vibe with. It was all about aesthetic. And I was big into fashion. I worked in fashion and beauty for 13 years. So it was in my wheelhouse, and I just took it and evolved and grew with it. And with that, my Instagram account obviously grew. But I think when we got to the pandemic, right before that, I was really, really interested in taking content to the next level. I was ready to visit video formats and really start getting in front of the camera more and talking, and not it just being pictures of me in an outfit or whatever have you, because that even got stale and old for me just from the creative side of it. Like there's only so many photos of yourself you can take. And not that that's something that I would never do again or that I'm not interested in, is just to do that all the time. I don't think that would have been enough. And I think subconsciously I knew it wasn't going to be enough. But unfortunately, as we got closer to the pandemic, I had a whole project that I had been working on. I was even talking about it on Instagram. And now I'm looking back at it and cringing at the fact that I was so loud about a project that never actually got off the ground. And it was all because in my mind, I knew, I was like, this can't be it for me. I can't just be some Instagram influencer who has nothing to say about anything. Nobody knows me outside of a picture. Like I have to have a voice. I have opinions about stuff. I just need to center it around what I'm the most passionate about. And obviously we go into lockdown. It's clear that the project that I was so gung-ho about getting people on board to do with me was not seeming like it was going to happen. Everything was shut down. Everything was literally the opposite. Like nobody was leaving their house. It wasn't happening. And that took a bit of time for me to kind of absorb and let go. And from that point, I said, you know what? Okay, fine. This isn't going to happen. I need to figure out a different avenue. And I need to start plotting and strategizing. And I was clearly putting a lot of pressure on myself. For what reason, I don't know necessarily. I'm still trying to figure that out. But then, unfortunately, then my father passed away in July of 2020. And then from there, my partner and I, right before my dad passed away, my partner and I decided we were going to sell our condo because we decided through the lockdown and working from home, this wasn't going to be sustainable for us. We can't both be working from home, and we didn't know at that point how long this was going to go on for. So we decided we were going to put the condo up for sale and that we would look for a house that had room for us to stretch, for us to do what we needed to do and try to get through this pandemic, right? So we start that process. Then in July of 2020, I unfortunately lose my dad. A week after that, we close on selling our condo. And then a week after that, we close on purchasing of the house that we're in now. And then we move in all within 3 weeks of my dad passing away. So now I'm in a new home, which I'm eternally grateful for. I love our house. It was probably the first house that we saw that it was an instant, like we just both knew this was our house. I've never been in a situation like that. My partner and I both, we like to weigh out a lot of different options. My partner specifically likes to kind of weigh things out even further. So when we both knew instantly that this was our house, it just felt right. So although everything in the background wasn't feeling or looking so good for me personally, it was exciting to start a new chapter. And in this house, starting over and being able to just be able to breathe new life into things, get re-inspired. At least that's what I was feeling in my head about it. And I think some of that was just a heightened distraction away from the things that I would have to actually deal with in order to get to where I'm at right now. So within weeks of living in this house, I went into a dark, dark hole. And I mean a dark hole. I did not post. I did not interact. I didn't respond to people's messages. I really had a hard time, as I'm sure most people do when they lose a parent. But I think for me, I almost felt like I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough things before my dad passed away to kind of show him like, I'm good. I'm getting what I want out of life now. So I think that was rubbing me wrong. And I think I went into this state of grief where I was just angry. I was angry at myself. I was angry at life. I was angry at how things just kept spinning in circles around me, but nothing ever seemed to like fall in my lap truly. So I just kind of left it as is. I was just going to be a viewer. I put it in my head that for right now, I do not have it in me to be a content creator, someone who is creative or coming up with ideas even, or even trying to put myself in that space, because I wasn't emotionally or mentally in a good space. So there's nothing good would have come out of that time, even if I would have forced myself to create. And so right before us moving into this house, TikTok became a thing, and it was perfect timing because obviously everyone was stuck at home and we needed some entertainment. And initially, I will be honest, and I hope no one at TikTok sees this, because now I'm eating crow, and I owe a lot of this to my partner, which is funny because I'm sure when he listens to this episode, he will use it as ammo to say I told you so, because he's already said that to me multiple times. Nonetheless, he was fascinated by it immediately. And for me, it was odd and interesting that he was so enamored with this social media platform that I know didn't just come out of nowhere, but it literally felt like it just popped up out of nowhere. And I think a lot of that had to do with just everyone being at home. There's nothing else to do. So TikTok it was. I wasn't thrilled with it. I didn't get it at first. He loved it. He was obsessed with it. He was on it when he wasn't at work. He was on TikTok. When we were not eating dinner or watching TV, he was on TikTok. When we were going to bed, he was watching TikTok. Now, I had not gotten on the app yet. I hadn't even downloaded it yet. But the few things that I did see that he was looking at confused me because I was like, well, what is this? Like, I don't want to do this type of content. Because at that time, it was a lot of like dances and those trending things. And it just wasn't me. Like, it was so far outside of my realm of creativity that I didn't get it. I didn't understand what we're doing here. Is this another Vine? Is this a dub smash? I don't know if you guys, shout out to anyone who remembers dub smash. I was obsessed with that, which is weird that I didn't like TikTok because some of the elements from dub smash are obviously embedded in what TikTok is. So, but nonetheless, he was so obsessed with it. He's like, you have to check this out. You're missing out. You are truly missing out on some great entertainment. It's really hilarious on here. And I think it was like one day on a Friday, we had gone to the grocery store, came quickly back because at that time we were still washing everything that we bought at the grocery store because we were scared to death. And I just sat down, I downloaded the app, and I just said, whatever. And I started scrolling on my FYP. And after a while, it started to make sense. I was like, oh, I get this. Because it's not only dancing, it's not only like funny, like trending type things. There's a lot of different people offering different just different pieces of entertainment in different categories. It was very, very strange and very eye-opening to me. And I don't know what it is about TikTok. I know the algorithm picks up on what you like, and it's based on what you find interesting, and then they'll show you more of those things. So, and I didn't really understand that at that time, but I knew that there was something here. This app, even if it was just for the pandemic, this was something I needed to pay attention to. But even then, I wasn't creating on it because, again, I was so married to Instagram. Like, I was in a 7-year long-term relationship with Instagram. So to me, like, yeah, TikTok at this point was growing on me, but I wasn't in a space where I was like, I'll give this a shot. Let me see where I can put my foot in. And so I just stayed a viewer. It wasn't my Georgio Says account. I think it was just whatever I linked to my Facebook account. I think you could log in through your Facebook account or something. So I just did it that way. So it wasn't even my page that I have now. And I started to build up an FYP that was clearly content creators that I needed to see it was very strange. So for instance, for an example, I was in a dark space mentally and emotionally, and I was in therapy, but there was like so many different versions of therapists that were on the app. And then there was like spiritual people. And between the therapists and the spiritual people, I was getting some shit done. I was doing the shadow work. And if you guys are not familiar with the shadow work, it's when you go in, you deal with like the dark stuff that you just never deal with because it's too heavy and you don't want to have to sift through it. But ultimately, when you do, you come out of it on the other side a way better human being. And I was finding myself watching TikToks, and people's content would speak to me, and I just felt like the content was for me. I needed to see this. And I just became immersed in this, I guess you could call it like TikTok self-help pathway. Now, don't get me wrong. This is a disclaimer. Don't take every bit of advice off TikTok because obviously it's the internet. Use your common sense, have some logic. But what I'm speaking of are people that actually are psychiatrists, they have the credentials, they're therapists, they are spiritual advisors, or they're the real deal. You know, you could, like, at least for me, I can sense BS a mile away with content creation when people just want to jump on trends that they think are going to do well. So, but these people in particular that I was following really got me through that first year, essentially, of being in a dark space, losing my dad, being in this lockdown, not sure where life was going, just a lot of question marks. And so it was slowly kind of patching up any of those question marks, or my self-doubt rather, of what my journey could look like going forward from here, because I couldn't even envision it because of the way the state of the union was, so to speak. The world was shut down. So where do you look to? Where do you go from here? Now, obviously, everything became very virtual. So that shifted things for people. And it actually kind of opened up doors more than it did before the lockdown, when people weren't so virtual, because then people could be connected no matter what. You didn't have to be in the same city. You didn't have to be in the, same time zone even. You could literally connect with people whenever you wanted to. And I think that was the beauty of the lockdown. But I think it also forced me to reevaluate where I was creatively with everything that I had dealt with. And I think before that, I focused on such a superficial aesthetic, which is a very small fraction of who I am, really. And so because of that, because I focused on such a small fraction of the superficiality in terms of content creation, I didn't have any context. I didn't have real opinions about anything. So if something was going on in the world, I may have an opinion about it, but for me to use my Instagram feed for that at that point, nobody would have cared. Nobody would have listened or read anything I had to say, because people only were following me for outfit of the day type things, So, but I also understand that if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be here either. So it's not to say that what I was doing was off or wrong, because again, it was a foot in. I've always been someone who tries to be progressive and look ahead and not get stuck on this one thing, because nothing remains the same forever. So you've got to literally ride the waves. And I think COVID scared me because I felt like I was going to be behind. And I already kind of felt that way after, my partner introduced me to TikTok, and I was like, no, I'm not getting on that app. And then I get on it and I'm like, oh my God, did I almost miss the boat on something great? As a viewer, I loved it. And there would be times where, like, my partner was like, you definitely should take the plunge and do something on TikTok. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. And that's all he would say. And I would always be like, yeah, I'll think about it, or I'll try to figure it out. But I wasn't able, it wasn't clicking for me, because I was still trying to strategize what my content would be based on an Instagram mentality. I wasn't really immersing myself in TikTok to understand it. So me just throwing myself out there, which I tried once or twice, the content was just whatever, because I just wanted to see how the app worked. So I started paying more attention, paid more attention to my FYP. I paid more attention to what the experts in the room were saying, because there was TikTok strategists that had accounts that also were super helpful in my journey. But it was just a wealth of knowledge being given away for free. And I so appreciated that. I can't tell you. So I changed my mentality, right? I started to understand TikTok. I started to understand what this app actually could do for me and how it can reinvigorate what I would like to do. But I still wouldn't make content. It's wild. I would draft things for sure, and then later go back to him and be like, what are you doing? You are not ready for this. This isn't it. This is not the vibe. Don't post that, So I would second guess everything I was doing, even though it was experimental. And I knew it was experimental. I knew if I was going to really take the plunge, I was going to do something official, create an official page, and really go in 100%. But I wasn't at that space. I was getting there, though. That's the thing. I could feel it in my gut that I was inching my way to posting something. So one day I decided, you know what? I want to kind of move away from this Giorgio not Armani. And because this is like my Instagram persona, which is basically a superficial feed of outfits, I want to kind of change the dynamic a little bit. And it was really easy for me. I think it took me 10 minutes. I was like, Georgio Says, that's going to be my handle. Okay. So I went on TikTok. I started a new page at Georgio Says, very minimal bio. And I think I posted like 3 TikToks. Okay. And they did well. And it wasn't commenting on Housewives. It was more pop culture because I was kind of testing the waters. So I think my first post had to do with like Paris Hilton because she had just launched her podcast talking about how Sarah Silverman actually like traumatized her at the MTV Movie Awards right before she checked in to go to jail for her DUI or whatever. And I remember waking up the next morning and being like, oh my gosh, holy shit. I think I might be onto something here. Now, do I love pop culture? Absolutely. Do I know what's going on in pop culture? Yes, I do, because I follow it all, because I've always been interested in it. And but the interesting thing about it all is that the majority of the content that I consume is reality television. I don't do a lot of scripted shows anymore. And I've always been a Housewives fan. Always been a Housewives fan from the very beginning. And shout out to my friend Michael Kilgore, who introduced me to the Real Housewives of Orange County and then introduced me to Real Housewives of Atlanta. You're a real gem, because honestly, like at that time, it was way ahead of its time. There was no other show like that, so it was like new. But then as it grew into this thing, and then we got Beverly Hills and obviously New York and all that stuff, like I was in it. But back then, we didn't have as much of the social media antics around the shows as we do now. Because again, I think the fandom obviously wasn't at that place yet. It was doing very well. It was obviously a great concept because it picked up a lot of viewership over the years, where it opened up doors for other cities to have their own franchises. And obviously, look at where we're at right now. But I did the 3 initially. And then I stopped because ultimately I realized I didn't have a real game plan. And I also wasn't 100% good in my skin doing it full throttle. So I stopped. I stopped pursuing it. I put it down and I went back to just kind of staying a viewer on TikTok. And just in my mind, I was like, I'm just doing more research. But in reality, I was deflecting and I wasn't really ready to take a chance on myself, which looking back on that is sad, because that taught me that, I need to have my own back. And if I don't trust my own gut, then why would anybody else want to trust me? So nonetheless, so July 15th, which is, a year after my dad passed. So now it's a year out since my dad passed. We're a year and something into the pandemic. Things have slightly opened up for a little bit. It's summertime, so a little bit more lax. It's the 1-year anniversary of my dad's death. It's the day I literally was fearing, because in my mind, I'm like, how is it a year already? It still feels like it was yesterday. I'm not looking forward to this day. His birthday is actually on the 11th. So that whole week for me is just a disaster emotionally. And my partner was like, let's do something different. Let's create a different memory so this doesn't always feel like this for you. So we go to dinner, and I think we had just gotten our meal. And the restaurant we were in is a very open restaurant. So it's very echoey. It even had like an event space in the back. And I think there was even like a open mic night separate from like the restaurant, but still attached. But there was like a separate event going on. It was like open mic night. And my partner and I are kind of sitting in the middle of the restaurant. So to keep things in perspective, this is a large open space, very echoey. And we're in the middle, sitting at a table in the middle of all this. My back is to the entrance of the restaurant. And so as I'm eating, I hear what I think are absolutely gunshots, and they are getting closer and louder. And within seconds, everyone in the restaurant jumps up, obviously, and starts to make their way towards the exit. And in that, my partner and I literally are trying to get out with a mass group of people who are also trying to get out because they're scared shitless. I have now blacked out. Like, I know what's going on, but in my mind, it's my mind is racing so fast. At some point, I get stuck behind. And so my partner makes it out of the restaurant, but I get stuck inside the restaurant. So now I am hiding under a table. I'm hearing people screaming. I'm still hearing ruckus, and I'm just sitting under the table. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be it. I'm going to literally die a year after my dad passed away. This is how this is going to end. This is how my story ends. This is absolutely insane. And I don't know what it was. Within that moment, things started to quiet down. And I remember seeing the door that everyone was running towards initially and felt like, I think it's safe enough that I can get out of here. Because I definitely didn't want to keep sitting where I was sitting because I still didn't understand what had happened. I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't know if the person was maybe outside of the restaurant, but I didn't hear anything else happening. So I took the shot and I just went, made my way outside, but couldn't find my partner. And then I started to freak out again because I was like, oh my God, what the fuck is going on? So I see him coming out through the front door, and he had gone back in to get our phones. But in that moment, I said to myself, and it was a promise I made to myself, I said, I will never, ever not do something that I want to do, creative or not, because my life could have been over tonight. And all those ideas and all those things that I was gonna do, all those things that I was gonna post, all the ideas that I could have made great, it wouldn't have mattered. And then a week later, I said, this is it. I'm going in 100%. I don't care how it turns out. I'm going to stay consistent with it. I'm going to do this. And that's what I did. And I think a lot of times people, even now, will be like, well, when did you start watching Housewives? Well, like I told you guys just now, I've been watching since the beginning. And I even went on Facebook because I was pulling up old Facebook statuses because I would comment about the shows on Facebook all the way. Like I've even seen ones that are early as like 2008, 2009. Like it's there. So it's always been in me. And outside of TikTok and everything else, the podcast, all that stuff, I've always talked about this stuff. And actually, people who know me always came and asked me questions about Housewives stuff. So it just feels natural to me. I'm also very organically connected in that space from different avenues over the years. So it's secondhand nature to talk about it. I also love production and reality TV, like the actual process of it. So that also intrigues me about the shows. And so I love diving into it and getting involved in all the like breaking of the fourth walls or things that we don't see because producers are cutting things to create storylines and narratives. So that's kind of how my journey, or this is how my journey kind of brought me here. So officially on TikTok for a year, my podcast officially same time, because I kind of decided I was going to do this as a duo, right? I was going to use TikTok to talk about all the stuff that I like talking about, but then I could take it a step further on my podcast and go in deep and talk in more depth about whatever it is I wanted to discuss. Like today's episode, this is all about my journey to Georgio Says, essentially. So, and I'm doing this really because I feel like I've really been grateful to build a great, awesome community between TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and this podcast. So, you guys should know my story. You should know where I'm coming from when I'm delivering the tea, if you will. Because this wasn't an overnight thing. I didn't just wake up one day and decide, oh, I think I'm going to start talking about Housewives. It was just something that naturally was a part of my being, and it just culminated on the TikTok app, and here we are. And I'm eternally grateful for that. And I couldn't see this working in any other way, honestly. I don't think if I would have jumped on TikTok right at the beginning of it, I think I would have gotten lost in the sauce, and I would have become frustrated, and I would not have understood any of the opportunities that it could bring me. So I think timing is everything. Life teaches you a lot. So you have to be self-aware. I learned how to be more self-aware since being on TikTok. But I've always kind of had this in me. So I've always had a thicker skin. So, a lot of times people ask me questions like, well, how do you deal with that? How does that not get to you after a while? And it's like, listen, it's not easy. And there are days where you hyper focus on the one bad comment, and it's literally sometimes the only comment that's negative, and I will hyper focus on that. And other creators have talked about this. You find yourself fixated on it, and then your whole day gets ruined because of this one stranger who you don't even know says this one thing. Like for me, and that's, I guess I've gotten some really like dark stuff sent to me, but the majority, the most consistent call out that I get is my eyebrows. 1000%. I either need to get them done, they're too bushy, like I can't focus on what you're saying because of your eyebrows. Like I get those comments pretty consistently. I feel like I should put it on a t-shirt at this point and actually monetize it. But for me, I think because I was always so fascinated about the entertainment world and the media and how media plays into narratives and things like that, I kind of always understood that came with the territory. That doesn't mean it doesn't get to me, because there are some times when people send me DMs and they're not so nice. So it's just interesting for me looking back on things. And when people ask me my advice, I don't really have advice. All I can say is you need to really listen to your gut. You should really kind of, if it doesn't feel good, then don't do it, because you'll never go wrong if you follow your gut. That's what I have learned. Because for me personally, I'm learning every day on this journey of mine, and I'm growing as well, but it's a learning curve some days. And there's a lot of content creators who, not to name names, simply are just not nice. Whether that be because they think that you're impeding on their territory, which there's enough room for everybody. There's enough room for, I don't just watch one. That's like me saying I only watch one franchise of Housewives because that's the only one that I like, and there's no room for me to like any other housewife franchises, which is obviously not true. We watch most of all of them. So that's how I feel with creators. Like I respect other creators. I respect what goes into doing what we all do. I respect the fact that not everyone has their own spin, and I love that for us. I love that everyone's got their own thing going on, and you can tell people apart, and that has been nice to see. But yes, you're going to deal with that. People are not always who they come off to be. And I had to learn that too in the last year. It's not everyone's nice to you because they want to be nice to you. Sometimes they want something from you, or they want to try to mess with you, or not give you credit on things that they should give you credit on. But you deal with all that stuff, but that's just life. That's like any other job. You're going to go into any type of career. There's always going to be a few people who are not really supportive, and they would love to see you fail. But all in all, this whole experience has really just taught me more than anything that you can do whatever you want to do as long as you have real passion and motivation behind it. I think for me, I love talking. So it's natural for me to be behind a mic commenting on things like Housewives or any other major pop culture thing, but mostly Housewives. Like my TikTok is very niche. It's very, very niche. I don't cover anything outside of Bravo. I definitely don't cover I mean, here and there, maybe Paris Hilton, but she's also got a connection now because of Kathy. So it's like an easy thread there. But for the most part, it's just housewives that I talk about. And I think that is something too that I try to talk to other people who are looking to get on TikTok and just say, look, don't do too many different things. I know some people say, yes, you should try out a lot of different things. And maybe that's great for people who can do multiple things very well. And then whatever sticks, sticks. So I would say in that situation, go for it. I have seen it. There's no rules. What I'm trying to say is, yes, there are some processes you should keep in mind. But whatever it is, whether you want to be on social media or you want to start a business or you want to do any of those things, I think it's just all about understanding the road you want to be on. And it doesn't need to look like anybody else's. And I think that's part of the issue. Sometimes people do the comparison thing. I do it sometimes. It's human nature for us to do that. But you got to pick yourself back up and say, okay, well, I'm not everybody else. I don't have to do it like everybody else. And so that's for me been my motive behind this, is to be as authentic and genuine to this as I can be, as I would not being on TikTok or having a podcast. If I was still only talking to the group of people that I know that I spill tea on housewives stuff, then yeah, fine. But now that I'm doing this publicly, it's doing really great things for me. And I have to recognize that it's all because I took this chance. And yes, life doesn't always give you what you want. Or I should say, it doesn't give you things the way you would like to see them presented. Sometimes your crown, if you will, is at the bottom of a bunch of garbage. And y'all just have to get your hands dirty and sift through that garbage to pick up your crown. So I think that was kind of my journey. And I'm still on my journey. I'm still learning and growing, but I have help. And I think that's the other thing I learned. Sometimes you can't deal with everything on your own. Sometimes you do need to enlist in resources. You do need to be around people that make you feel great, that aren't going to make you feel less than because they're hating on your idea. I also learned, stop telling everybody all your ideas, because not everyone needs to know, nor do they care. And sometimes people do not wish the best for you in those ideas. So with that being said, Housewives has been in my life for over a decade at this point. I am very much continuing to grow and build my brand. I am working on new things, and I'm excited to see where this road takes me, because it's been something that I've always wanted my entire life. And now it's finally happening. My manifestations are coming into fruition. And so I guess with that, I would say, like, and if you guys are interested in getting on TikTok, or you're interested in figuring out what it is that you could do on there, please email or DM me. I am not a gatekeeper. I do not hold there's no secrets here. So if you guys out there are interested in getting some tips, or if you want my advice on it, feel free to DM or email me. I always respond. I try to respond as much as I can, as quickly as I can. But nonetheless, I'll respond, because I think it's like, that's part of the other issue I find too. Like, a lot of times people don't want to share certain things. And I get, no one needs to share every bit of their whole strategy. I'm not asking for people's strategies. What I'm saying is there's always that, there's still room for friendly advice, right? You don't have to give all of the secrets and strategies away, but you can still give enough information to give people a boost. And that's how it worked for me. I mean, my partner was the reason why I got on TikTok in the first place. And if he hadn't pushed, who knows how much longer it would have taken for me to even give it a chance, if it wasn't in my background all the time. Because that's the other thing. I kept hearing it when he would be on it. And it was this platform I couldn't figure out. And now I have, and now it's like, obviously, it is what it is. TikTok's the new Instagram, if you will. Like, Instagram now is what Facebook is to people who were on Instagram. It was like, oh, you're on Facebook? Oh, Instagram is where you should be. Now it's like, ew, you're on Instagram? Oh no, you're not on TikTok? Oh, I'm not gonna I don't go on Instagram. So it's like, although I know Instagram's not going away, just like Facebook's not going away, but it's going to be used differently. Obviously, it's been through a ton of changes since TikTok came out. But like, I'm still trying to revamp Giorgio, not Armani, like my Instagram, like my stories. I share all Housewives stuff. But if you look at my feed, there's not really anything on there about Housewives. So I'm just in the process now where I'm trying to strategize on how to revamp that, how to tie the two things together, to just basically create an extension of myself. So I feel like it's important for content creators when you can give some context to your audience to let them see different facets of you. Because just like on watching Housewives, you know, one season you may hate this one housewife, the next season you'll love her. It's all based on the context and the obviously the edits, but everyone's got different facets of their personality. And I think it's interesting when you get to showcase that through different formats of content. Obviously, TikTok is all about commentary on Housewives and Bravo, but then on Instagram, it's not to say that I couldn't do that, but also put a spin on it that has the same vibe aesthetic, but still keep it fresh for Instagram and keep it consistent. So that's my goal right now. Well, one of them at least is trying to get my Instagram feed popping and making sense. Because right now, to me, it doesn't make sense. But I hope I'm not rambling too much on this episode. This is why, like, I really wanted to focus in on this so that you guys could just try to get to know me a little bit more, because I feel like I don't really talk about myself all too much, which is a good thing because it's not what you're coming here for. You're coming to listen to what I bring in terms of the tea and stuff. But I do think because I have such a great community of people, you guys are so supportive. You send me the sweetest messages. And so I feel like you guys share so much stuff about yourselves with me personally. It's only fair that you guys get to know a little bit more about me. So that's what I wanted to focus on for this particular episode. Just another reminder, I'll still be in Greece next week. Not to worry, the Patreon will still come out on Friday and my podcast episode will be out on Wednesday. But I will definitely be keeping you guys posted while I'm in Greece, because I obviously am not, like I said earlier in the episode, I'm not going to be able to do any podcasting or any of that, just because I'm not obviously going to have my equipment, and then we'll be in a different time zone. So, but TikTok and Instagram, I will definitely keep up on, just because obviously I'm not going to be completely dead to the world. But I want to say also thank you to all the subscribers. I got some new Patreon subscribers. So I'm very, very, very grateful to you guys. I couldn't do any of this without all of you and your support. So if you haven't checked out my Patreon, you are missing out. It's not that old of a Patreon, so you still can catch up. I think we're only, 4 or 5 bonus episodes in. But I really go into some juicy stuff on those, because there's just certain things that, like, I obviously know don't have any valid points and there's no concrete evidence, but it's just fun to kind of dish on and talk about it and dig into those rumors a little bit more. So that's kind of what my Patreon is about. I'm kind of just going there. We talk about the blind items, we talk about the rumors. But yeah, so thank you to all my Patreon subscribers. I love you dearly. I love all my TikTok followers. Obviously, you guys are my OGs, because you guys were the ones that got me here. So I love you guys, obviously. So if you're not following me on TikTok, it's at Georgio Says. And yes, you should follow me on Instagram. I know I said I was revamping my Instagram, but that does not mean that I'm not posting on my stories. My stories are popping, guys. My stories are hot. Okay. I'm just saying. And there's the other thing is, you have to remember, there's certain things I can't post on TikTok because it will get flagged and removed and reported. So oftentimes the things I can't share on TikTok, I post on my Instagram stories. This is why you should be following Giorgio, not Armani, on Instagram. Okay. All right. Well, until next week, guys, I'm going to leave you with that. And I hope that each and every one of you took something away from this episode, whether it was to inspire you, whether it was to do, work on yourself. If there's an area of your life you're not happy with, like, focus the time there and make it right with yourself. You owe it to yourself, and don't give up. Don't give up. I know I've heard this so many times, and people, it just sounds like just a saying on a t-shirt at this point, but it's true. Right when you think you're about to give up, it's literally right there. It's literally around the corner. So if you gave up, you could miss it. So you don't want to do that. And I know a lot of you send me messages, and a lot of you have some great, awesome ideas. You just got to pull the trigger somewhere. And I get it. Timing, like I said earlier, timing is everything. Go with your gut. Okay. Until next time, guys, I love you, and I will talk to you next week. All right. Take care. Bye.